welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And this week, we're talking about the antithesis of last week. Last week, we talked about a movie that was overblown, constantly just bombarded with special effects, with sound effects, with nostalgia, memories, and everything like that. And this week, we're talking about a much more minimalist film, a film with more complex emotions, a film with no explosions, which is always a plus, and it's actually not overblown and oversaturated. It's only a 90-minute runtime, so like you still have an afternoon, which is lovely.
Isn't it nice to go see a film where you're not sitting through the entire third act in a big dumb explosive battle, like checking your phone, hoping either it will be over or you'll pass out and die, whatever comes first.
Just hoping for the blessed release of anything. But no, this week we watched A Quiet Place, another horror movie from an originally comedic talent that has turned to directing. And much like Jordan Peele's Get Out, I thought this was really good. I think Krasinski did a really nice job directing it. I really enjoyed it overall. It was tense. It was good. It was... the sound design for a movie called The Quiet Place has to be incredible, and it lived up to it, in my opinion. Like it was technically wonderful. The story was pretty solid. It kept you going the entire time, and I mean, the monster was creepy enough, so points there.
So, A Quiet Place. A quiet place. Unlike Sean, I was not super fond of A Quiet Place. It would not be fair of me to say that I thought it was bad, even though I didn't really like it, because obviously a lot of talent and craft and heart went into it, and it shows a lot of the time.
Calm down, Mati.
You can get out of here for that one. You can leave.
Make like Jordan Peele and Split.
No, stop.
You put me down a corner, Jackson. It's my only. It's fight or flight, and for me, it's fucking puns. Okay, so like, it's my most vicious weapon.
The most vicious fight that there is. Oh god. So Quiet Place. I thought there were a lot of good shots, a lot of good sequences, a couple of standout moments, but overall as a package. And it's sort of hard for me to explain why without spoilers, but I'll just briefly kind of talk about the general feeling. This is one of those movies that kind of lost me early on with sort of the core, maybe emotional thread, and then I never quite got back to it for, this and there, some reasons that I will admit are very much personal pet peeves of mine. But yeah, just as far as the story went, I was not a big fan of the script, and the monster itself I felt like looked like the modern movie monster. I think Movie Bob's review described it as like a Cloverfield monster, like xenomorph hybrid, which I think is completely accurate, because there's so many. It feels like in every modern monster movie, whenever you need a monster, you kind of go with something that looks sort of like this. Like, this is what like the Demogorgon in Stranger Things basically looks like.
It's also really apt, because I was just talking to people about this, and apparently this was looked at to being a movie set in the Cloverfield universe, which makes a lot of sense, actually.
I was going to say, that would be really appropriate, actually, yeah.
Like, it's if you watched Cloverfield, if you watched 10 Cloverfield Lane, if you've, God help you, watched the Cloverfield Paradox, you kind of get the idea that, Cloverfield movies are much more personal stories set around the background of something like this, and that is absolutely what this is. It's another personal story set around the background of a horror movie, of a monster movie, and it would fit much better in the Cloverfield universe than Cloverfield Paradox. I have a lot of thoughts on that one. Come at me with that. Argue. I want to talk about this movie, and there's not enough people who have seen it because it was bad. And not enough people care about Cloverfield.
Because it was bad, and it was only notable because it came out as a surprise. The same trick they tried for the Sega Saturn, and it didn't work then either.
Yeah, you know, the two things you put together, Sega Saturn and Cloverfield movies, obviously.
See, but 10 Cloverfield Lane, like the Cloverfield movies, that is a really good point of comparison, because like when I was sort of evaluating it as a thriller, I felt maybe I was being a little unfair because like sort of the last horror thriller I saw in the theaters was Get Out, which obviously is like a really elevated like borderline masterpiece. So I felt maybe it was a little unfair to say that like I didn't feel the tension like I did in Get Out. But 10 Cloverfield Lane is another film that has a similar sort of tone and has similar sort of ambitions. And that's a really great movie also. But yeah, I just didn't feel like the narrative tension wasn't there for me in a movie in a movie that seemed to have very similar goals. And that's I feel like that's pretty much all I can say about my thoughts on it without spoilers.
Well, let's just dive into spoilers and kind of start talking about them in, you know, the place that we usually start, which is the beginning. And I know this is a huge point of contention for you. The more I thought about it, really liked it. If you haven't seen the movie, the basic premise of what we're setting up here is, you know, the monsters cannot hear you, or the monsters cannot see. They are entirely auditory, so everyone is incredibly quiet the entire time, hence A Quiet Place. And we see the family that we're going to be living with throughout the course of the movie in some sort of like CVS type place, getting things together, and one of the children is playing with a spaceship that we find out lights up and makes a bunch of noise. A whole little bit of internal conflict about, do we give it to the kid? One of the other kids apparently gives it to him. The kid takes the batteries that they took out of the spaceship, and they go about their way until the kid presses the button and is pretty much instantly killed by one of the Demogorgon Cloverfield monsters. So it sets up a lot of the movie in a number of ways, and in ways that I really like. You know, when we talk about the first death of a movie, we a lot of times discuss how it sets up expectations for deaths going forward in the movie and how it is going to be handled, you know, thereon. And my initial reaction was, okay, so this is, you know, what we're in for. It's going to be quick. It's going to be pretty much bloodless. It is only a PG-13 movie. You know, it really kind of sets your expectations. And, you know, noise, dead, instant, good. It's not until the movie continues that you do kind of get that realization that it's kind of a Cloverfield movie and that it's much more of a personal story than a horror movie. It is the personal story first and foremost. So this child's death really sets up the rest of the plot, which is a grieving family dealing with the death of their child in a world that is inhospitable. Yeah,
I think that's a good summation of like what's going on and how the little boy's death is functioning as sort of our starting point. And so the setup, not necessarily the setup, but the execution of this just really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think it's important when talking about a scene like this to sort of address like children in fiction, particularly in like horror movies and thrillers, because I know that having a kid in the story can elicit strong feelings either way. Like, there will be a camp who hates kids in movies, like, doesn't want them in there at all, like, thinks they're cheap and annoying. Then there'll be another camp who, like, really adds a lot of, like, pathos to it. There will be another camp who, like, just doesn't want to see kids in, like, violent situations just for some, like, you know, maybe personal moral reason, like, you know, being, finding the idea too, like, I don't want to say traumatizing, but, like, maybe that crosses some sort of line. A lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about kids in movies, and I do have a specific pet peeves about kids that I'll go into a little bit later, but generally in movies, like, I approach a kid character like I would any other character. Like, how have they been set up? How is their role playing out in the story? I don't automatically dislike a kid character or find them annoying, but I'm not necessarily automatically endeared to a character just because they're a child either. And so the movie with the whole setup, it's not just that he takes the spaceship and, like, wants to have some joy in this, like, harsh world, and then the sister ends up giving him this spaceship. Like, that's a very human, relatable, understandable thing. But where it crosses the line of believability for me is that we specifically have the scene where the dad tells him not to do it, and explains in, like, no uncertain terms that, like, we're in a world full of scary monsters. Like, we can't have this liability. Also, it makes noise and flashy lights, and, you know, it takes batteries. Like, we gotta take those out. And so we get this elaborate scene of them taking the batteries out and, like, making a big point of it. And then almost immediately right after, the kid puts them back in like an idiot. And just while they're walking along, like, doesn't even wait, just, like, pulls it out. It makes a noise, and he gets trucked immediately. And I just thought the scene was just a big eye roller for me. Not only because I don't buy that the kid would be that dumb. Even, like, I know that, like, kids are individuals, and that not every kid is going to react to a situation the same way, but I know that when I was a kid, I was, like, frightened by everything, and would, like, react to danger in a very specific way. So the fact that this kid knows, we have no reason to assume that he doesn't know that there are, like, monsters out, that, like, it hasn't been made clear that, like, there's something really bad out there. And he just goes ahead and disobeys his dad anyway. I mean, I guess, like, it's really like splitting hairs here, but I feel like the scene would have been a lot more effective if, like, we didn't get that elaborate explanation of, like, the batteries and, like, you know, having it explicitly shown, because then I just think the kid's a moron, and I don't really have any sympathy for him. But, like, if we do have that core, like, human connection of, hey, I'm gonna try to be a good big sister and, you know, help you sneak this toy past dad, but we don't know that it makes noise. Like, we don't know that it takes batteries. And then maybe later when you're playing with it, like, it comes as a surprise to everybody. That would just ring a little more true for me. And I know that we're getting really nitty-gritty into the details on this, but just because, like, the whole emotional turmoil in the family, like you said, it's sort of all about their grief, all about their grieving process, and, you know, in the relationship between the dad and the daughter, like, whether guilt or blame is placed, like, that's a big issue between them. He just ends up being, like, the centerpiece of the whole story. So the fact that, like, I just found the scene, the moment where he's like, I want to go in this spaceship and, like, escape from Earth, like, that we start on that, it felt a little too, like, Hollywood schmaltz for me to, like, really work as a scene to endear me to him, and then he just, like, acts like an idiot, so I'm not emotionally affected by the kid's passing at all. And so that doesn't preclude me necessarily from being able to sympathize with the family, who obviously would obviously be, like, completely devastated by this. But the fact that it's something that I understand rather than feel was a big barrier for like getting me invested in the movie, if that makes sense.
I do see where you're coming from, and I don't think that you are, by any means incorrect in your assessment here. I think that, interestingly enough, as you're talking about, I realize that like that Hollywood schmaltziness kind of bookends the movie in a weird way. But barring that, I think that there's an element of just and I want to talk about this more in detail later on. I think that there's an element of like the father trying to grow out of being overly protective of his kids. Like, I mean, obviously it's a harsh environment and overprotection's arguably important, but he's going too far and not letting his kids learn in a way. And like, I feel like that's an element that is trying to be present throughout the movie. And I know that in our pre-discussion, we kind of debated how effective that is. And so, I mean, effective or not, I feel like it's definitely present in this moment. Like, the idea of it is. And what they were trying to go for, of the dad being overbearing and not letting the children learn to not make a shit ton of noise with the spaceship. That's the word of it. So I think it's there. Just how well it's portrayed is the question.
See, for me, I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because like I know on my viewing, like I didn't get that feeling as much. Like, obviously there's something going on with the dad and his relationship with the kids. He doesn't let the girl come out on like patrol, but the fact that he goes out with his other son and like really tries to teach him, like, despite the son sort of wanting to stay in, like, the realm of safety, like, I think that he does make an attempt in this way, and definitely in that first scene for me, it didn't seem like the dad was being too overbearing or unreasonable to me. It seemed like I thought the dad handled that situation reasonably well, like, just sort of carefully, like, taking it out and just like trying to explain. Like, it wasn't like I never got the sense of that opening scene that like he was going too far by doing this, or like shielding them in some way, which is why that I can see, and I had thought about that, like, maybe that's supposed to like tie into that later, but it's not something that really jumped out at me as maybe the big driving concern with this character, because it felt like the biggest driving concern with this character was his strained relationship with his daughter, and being able to express that he still loved her, that he didn't blame her, and like trying to reestablish that connection more so than being overprotective. Because we do get that scene. And maybe it's just like a values thing, because we do get that scene of like dad telling her not to go down the stairs. But like I'm sitting here thinking, and this is the sort of movie I'm not usually like logic guy who like tries to nitpick a movie to death. But when you do have a movie that's very reliant on rules, I think it's important to establish the rules really well. And to its credit, like by the midpoint of this movie, I thought everything, all my pertinent questions had been answered. But like we get that moment of the daughter trying to go down the stairs and the dad stopping her, and I was just sitting there wondering, why do they have anything in the basement at all? Like, why was the first thing they did, like, not minimize risk by having anything they needed from the basement, like, sort of establish in another area where they wouldn't have to risk, like, going down the stairs? Because we do see, if the point is that the dad is too protective, then the film ultimately proves him right, because the stairs turn out to be a major problem, with the scene with the mom and the nail sticking out. So, I mean, I definitely do see the element of, like, maybe the dad's being too protective, but this is just me sitting here, like, having played a bunch of, like, apocalypse games, like, having seen a bunch of, like, zombie movies and stuff, like, just thinking about, sort of the practicalities and, like, what you would do, and thinking that, oh, yeah, Dad's absolutely right. Like, yes, you should be very cautious in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's undeniably true. Like, it is kind of presented in a double-faceted manner, in that he does ultimately end up being right almost every time. I guess, honestly, it's the only way it makes sense in my mind. So I guess this could arguably be a failing of the movie then. It just kind of, my mind filled in those blanks and kind of accepted that it was how the scene was presenting itself. Because, on hindsight, with you discussing further elements of it, I'm kind of finding it hard for this theory to hold water in a better sense. So I'm kind of lost a little bit, to be perfectly honest, as to how to better defend this scene. But I'm also going to argue that the scene might not actually need defending, and it plays just fine on its own. I know that, once again, we obviously disagree on this scene and how well it works in the movie. But I think as just a standalone scene, as something that is being set up in the movie, it does work rather well as far as the establishing action for the movie. Obviously there's elements of who fucked up, how they fucked up, and everything like that, and I think that works well to show the grief and the dad and daughter both debating amongst themselves who's to blame, do they blame me, do I blame them type of situation. So I think this scene works, honestly. I think it works better than you're giving it credit for.
So yeah, I mean, I guess, like, if I just, like, I can't point to any one individual thing about it that is necessarily, like, something that's glaringly awful, but just, it just, the way it ends up playing out just sort of rubbed me the wrong way and put me in a position, that's maybe something I could have gotten over, couldn't gotten over if just the rest of the character arcs and sort of the way the rest of the movie played out had resonated with me strongly. But a lot of that stuff didn't end up working super duper well. And I mean, I know I'm going, like, pretty hard right now. I want to reiterate that there are definitely scenes, like the whole sequence with the mom, like, trying to not give birth while the thing is in the house. Like, that's probably the most, like, tense scene in the movie for me. Like, that was a real standout. But that just brings me to the other thing that is maybe less defensible for me, because I'd mentioned that I do have a pet peeve about kids, and it's a very specific pet peeve. And I don't mind kids in stories, but it's very hard to get me to care about a baby in a... I know there is literally no way I can explain this without sounding like a complete sociopath, but as I was sort of saying, like, I was trying to think of examples of kids, like, younger or older, like, being set up as characters. I'm thinking of, like, a similar situation, a character that kind of exists only to die. I mean, minor spoilers, but this game's really old. I'm thinking of, like, Joel's daughter in The Last of Us. She pretty much exists just to motivate Joel, just to kind of, like, explain his grief, just to get fridged, basically.
Really quick, we should stress, if you have not played The Last of Us, Ellie, right? That's her name?
Yeah.
Is not his daughter.
No.
We're not spoiling the end of the game here. This happens in, like, the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, this is basically backstory, what I'm talking about here, but it plays as, like, a short prologue. So Sarah, not Ellie, Sarah, Joel's daughter, We even get a little moment where we kind of like play as her. We kind of walk around. We get to like see her room. She has some interactions with her dad, and we kind of see what her relationship is like before, before like she is ultimately killed as part of the course of the initial zombie outbreak. And with that, even though she's like a kid, like she's still presented as like a character with like her own individual traits. And it's not impossible to do this with a baby, but it is very hard to make a baby more than just a plot device. And that, again, sounds super harsh. And I realize part of this is me being like a cold, unfeeling machine who doesn't get particularly teary-eyed at the presence of a baby. I know that this is as I said, a personal pet peeve. But the fact that ended up being like the other sort of central drama to the film, that the mom was pregnant and like they're trying to take all these precautions to keep the baby quiet and be able to raise it, that just, it didn't leave me with a feeling of dread. It left me with a feeling of like, okay, you guys are all screwed. Like, there is no way you're going to be able to keep this thing quiet. Babies are basically unpredictable. I mean, I'm not an expert on babies, I should stress. Like, this is all just like gut feelings. That's why it's a personal pet peeve. But like, babies are completely unpredictable. They're gonna make a lot of noise. And especially in this movie, like, that's a death sentence. And it left me weirdly with the opposite feeling that the presence of the baby was supposed to give. That the baby's purpose is to make us feel more sympathy for the family because they're in a difficult situation. But it just basically, the only thing I could think of was like, should have used a condom, dude.
Obviously, the fact that they're having a child is, I don't believe, unintentional. And I think that kind of goes back to the whole emotional arc of the father as he, tries to reconcile with the fact that he had a child die and they clearly both want one. Or at least that's like the idea I was getting off of it. So I don't, like, it was clearly in my mind, a conscious decision to bring this child into the world. It was kind of a, we have to try and somehow still survive type of thing. And I feel like had it been, my mind filled in the blank of, let's see what happens type of thing. Like, the human race, for it to survive, would obviously need to procreate. Let's see if it's possible to. And part of that could just be, like, that's the type of science fiction bullshit that I'm all about. So, obviously, I could be filling in blanks where there aren't blanks. But I liked it. I liked the idea of this child as tension. I think it worked in a lot of scenes. I do concede the unpredictability of the child kind of messes with the final scene a little bit, and in an odd way. But I think overall, the baby does make a lot of noises, even in earlier scenes, that kind of lends itself to the child is unpredictable. Like the first time that there's a monster in the basement with the mother and the child, the baby is kind of quietly cooing and making noises, so she has to find a way to stifle the child while still, not killing it or anything like that. And I think that's a really interesting conundrum. I think that the only place that it really does fall apart is the final scene, which I have some questions about anyway. Not necessarily, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's a little out of place.
Yeah, the final scene was definitely, because when I'm talking about like the problems.
Oh my god, what? No! You know what it's like?
What?
It's like a fucking Cloverfield ending.
Oh, it totally is.
It's like the ending of 10 Cloverfield Lane in so many ways, and I like the ending of 10 Cloverfield Lane, and I kind of like the ending of this, but they're both kind of wildly out of place.
No, you're totally right. Yeah, it kind of goes like the fact that it was a weird choice to have the last frame of the movie be the mom pumping the shotgun.
Yeah, I was really unsure about that one.
But no, I mean, regarding that last scene, like, that was the only scene where the baby bothered me.
That makes sense as a Cloverfield ending, though, too. No, and, like, from a, we're going to go fight back, or we're going to take it back, was the ending of 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yes.
That's how Cloverfield movies end, is with the argument that we're going to continue to fight and going to continue to survive.
The first one doesn't really end like that.
No, but, like, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I mean, I'm just about to start arguing about Cloverfield because I'm very passionate about those movies. Keep rolling.
So, regarding this final scene, it was the only scene where the logic of the baby ended up tripping me up. And that's the fact that, like, there was this big scary monster running around, and it seemed to only cry when it was convenient for it to. Like, especially after the daughter starts using the hearing aid, which, has been established as kind of their weakness. And, the fact that, again, I'm no expert on babies or, like, developmental psychology, but, if there was this big, like, horrible, like, Cthulhuoid running around, like, snarling and making a bunch of noise, like, I'm pretty sure that if I walk into a room with a baby that's, like, just kind of doing its own thing, and went like, ah! And, like, made a really sudden noise, I'm pretty sure it would cry. You can make a baby cry pretty easily. And, so I was really questioning it there. But I do kind of want to come back to one thing you said with the choice, whether or not the baby was an intentional choice on the part of the parents. Because if that is the case, then I have even less sympathy for them. Because I hadn't considered that. But, like, it's... Especially just because it's not like... if this were just like a run-of-the-mill, like, zombie monster movie, like, sure, I can go along with the, like, trying to rebuild the human race, like, especially because, like, they're pretty established and, like, with their own, like, sense of grief. But if Dad's so concerned about protecting his family, then they probably shouldn't be doing literally the worst possible thing that will put their entire family in danger with another mouth to feed and a ticking time bomb of noise. So that, I hadn't considered that, but I feel like that possibility exacerbates the issue for me. And just sort of makes another bit of a remove. But yeah, the ending, I guess just regarding the baby issue, because I mean I don't want to. There are a few other things about this movie I don't want to harp on it for too much longer. But I did think the way it resolved was pretty cool. I liked I think having, aside from maybe that final frame with, like, the shotgun pump, I think that they managed to take one out how they did using the sound. I thought that was pretty neat. I liked that.
It's not the most, like, unique type of thing, like, oh, they're blind, just crank up the sound type of thing. But it was really well set up throughout the movie, and it paid off in a very nice way. I really liked how the whole thing worked together, and I liked it when it was just like the last one that they were just trying to kill really quick, and I figured that was kind of going to be the end of the movie. I was curious to see how they ended it. I was not expecting it to end the way that it did, but
yeah, one thing I was expecting both of the parents to die, or I was expecting the ending to be sadder. Actually, I guess maybe not necessarily that both the parents would die, but I was expecting more of the cast was alive at the end than I thought would be, which, not a criticism necessarily, but I think just sort of an interesting choice that it ends on kind of this action-y, hopeful note.
God, I'm still on the fact that this is clearly a Cloverfield movie. Like, I'm sorry, I have to go back to this because, like, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Because, like, the other thing is that Cloverfield movies tend to be kind of weird experimental movies, like playing with things that don't tend to be made into movies, like, the hand cam at the time, and the second one with the whole unreliable narrator going on. So for the third one to be like, hey, everything's quiet, is totally right up the alley. It makes sense for it to be a... There's just so many reasons why this is and should have been a Cloverfield movie. It would have been a better Cloverfield movie than the one they released, too. Like...
I haven't even seen the Cloverfield Paradox, and it sounds like I could probably agree with that.
Like, okay, I don't think I've talked about the Cloverfield Paradox yet on this podcast, nor I don't think we've talked about really Cloverfield at all. So I'm gonna take a minute.
We should do an episode on 10 Cloverfield Lane at least eventually.
Oh my God, yes, please. I in case it's not painfully clear at this point, the Cloverfield series is one of my all-time favorites. I really liked the first one when I saw it as a kid, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that it held up better than I thought it was going to. And then when 10 came out, I was blown away. It was far better than I could have imagined it was going to be. And then Cloverfield Paradox came out, and I'm gonna talk about that for a second because I need to vent some feelings.
Let it all out, Sean. Let it all go.
It was fine, and I stress fine in the worst possible way. Because there's about 10 minutes of a really good Cronenberg movie. Like, there's just some great body horror, some kind of good jokes about it and everything like that. Like, there's a solid couple minutes in there where it's actually really good. And then it goes back to what it was, which is not Cloverfield, because Cloverfield movies are not about explaining things. They are not about giving insane back details about everything. They are about small personal stories in a bigger scenario. And this movie tried to take like 4 of them, combine it into one movie, and also give backstory the entire time through. Because the thing that no one was asking for was reasons for all of this to be happening. That's not what we want from Cloverfield. As a Cloverfield fan, I can tell you that's not what we want. We like the personal stories. We like the monsters in the background. We like the goofy args to put together and try and figure out more about what's happening. We don't just want to be told. And this movie is just explaining and not showing at all fucking times. It is so hard to watch for that. And then it goes off the rails at the end where it's just like one guy... You know what? I don't even fucking care. Spoilers for the Cloverfield Paradox for like the next 30 seconds.
Welcome to the Cloverfield cast!
Because I'm so mad. At one point, one of the characters gets killed because like these magnetic claws come out and just like eviscerate him, and it is never established why these things happened or why this all went down. Like, he's in this room that suddenly gets magnetic, which makes sense because like there's this whole like 2 ships on top of each other type of thing. So like wacky things like that can happen. I get a room suddenly being magnetic. There's arguably an explanation for it. But these tentacle things come out of the wall. Like these metallic... That's not how metal works. That's not how any of this works. What is this? You know what you want to do in that scene? Have the tools that just stuck to the wall suddenly reverse and go through him. That will kill him. Problem solved. You don't have weird, wacky tentacles coming out of walls. This movie made me really mad, and I was really excited for it.
So what you're saying is that the Cloverfield Paradox turns into tentacle hentai about 3/4 of the way through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for about 30 seconds, and it's thoroughly confusing and very bad. It's, and this would have been so much better as a Cloverfield movie. Okay. Clover cast over.
Back to your regularly scheduled programming.
I will. The one thing I do, just because we've kind of been harping on this movie a little bit and just kind of discussing some of the flaws and how it would just be a better Cloverfield movie in general. I do want to kind of just briefly touch on the fact that like the sound design is so fucking incredible. I was blown away watching it. Like, it was so good. And my hope beyond all hope is that when this movie comes out on DVD, we get a director's cut that doesn't have the backing music. Because I'm willing to bet that somewhere out there is a version of this movie that does not have the backing music to it. So the whole sound design behind this movie is basically everything is very loud, and like just little things are loud, like, you know, they'll walk through the sand and whatnot and you can hear every footstep and everything like that, which is awesome. It makes a lot of sense as to why, you know, you're in a very quiet, secluded area, so every noise sounds like a big thing. And the girl, which I don't think we've even touched on this, is deaf, which is really cool just for representation because she's actually deaf in real life, and they do a lot of really good sign language. But whenever the camera is on her, the audio fades out, and you get much more of just ambient nothingness, which works really well in the movie, and it kind of just demonstrates a lot of like the lack of understanding about what's going on behind her in one scene and everything like that, and it's a really cool effect. The one thing that stays is the backing music, and there's only like one or two scenes where it actually does stay, but you can still kind of faintly hear it, especially at one point it actually swells up behind her, which was kind of weird and out of place for me. So I am convinced that there is a silent version of this movie.
That's a really good point, actually, because I do remember a couple times where the score was distracting like that. I do remember thinking that was a weird choice, but yeah, overall, I would agree in that, like, the sound design, they needed to get that right for this kind of movie, and they did. They occasional weirdness with the score here and there. Everything else,
which I bet they put in there because somebody said it's going to be too weird and, you know, auteur-y or something like that for it to just be a almost entirely silent movie.
Yeah,
like it's going to be too off-putting.
That's very much that definitely sounds like something a producer or CEO or someone might say. That's a very focus group thing to add. So,
and I mean, they're not. I would argue. I'm going to tail off again for a second, because I would argue that, like, they're probably not wrong to add that. I got out of Isle of Dogs last night, which, some problematic elements aside, was a very, very good movie. But it was also very much an auteur film, in that there were a lot of just kind of poignant pauses and some space that's, you know, intentionally there to kind of give the audience, you know, it's Wes Anderson, a moment to take in the visuals or process what's happening or something, whatever. And a lot of those moments were kind of filled with just laughter. It was a very crowded theater, but kind of like uncomfortable laughter of people not sure if they should be laughing right then or there. And it was really frustrating because it very much felt like people were like, oh, there's a space here, I guess I should laugh or something. And I just wanted to be like, no, guys, just enjoy it. It's a beat in the movie. That's what this movie is. It's a movie of beats and moments. And I feel like that idea of people just kind of uncomfortably unsure what to do with themselves would apply very much to A Quiet Place. But I think that would work really well for the movie because you're supposed to be uncomfortable.
You know, I must have gotten very lucky recently with my theater crowds because I know that a lot of people have been talking about obnoxious crowds in A Quiet Place. People not realizing that sound is integral to the title, and man, like, oh no, like just like shouting at the screen. I don't know if your crowd was like that, but mine was actually.
I had a kid say 2 points when the mom shot the Demogorgon in the head.
Oh, good. Great. No, my theater crowd was actually pretty respectful. And between that and like the fact that I'm pretty sure I went to the only screening there's ever been of The Last Jedi where people didn't clap during the Lightspeed charge. I think I've gotten very lucky.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Yeah. And that, I mean, this definitely, I don't know, this does seem like the kind of movie that might be best suited. I don't want to say best suited for Netflix because that sounds dismissive, but like, you know, like curling up like in a blanket, like in a dark room, like it's late at night and you're kind of by yourself watching it. Like, I feel like that that might end up being kind of the optimal way to experience this, just so you have that removed. Because even in a screening in a theater, even when people aren't being, you know, assholes, there's still the factor of like people reaching for their drinks and like accidentally like
just general shuffling.
Yeah, just some shuffling. So this seems like the rare film. And I'm normally all about the theater-going experience. This seems like the rare film that seems like it's better at home.
I would say if like you have listened to this all the way through and you haven't seen it yet, if you can go to the theater at like 11 o'clock on a Monday morning and they're showing this, then it's probably worth it because you're not going to get a whole lot of people there and it's just going to be quiet. And like I think it works rather well on a big screen if you don't have 14-year-old assholes being assholes. You know what? I've said this before. Just because it's PG-13 doesn't mean you have to let the 13-year-olds in. They don't have to be there. We can enjoy a movie. Tell them to go see Truth or Dare next week. That's going to be a movie that'll be more up their alley. She breaks her hand with the hammer. Oh!
Like Unfriended with the kid putting his hand in the blender. Like that's what the youth need to see today. That's where they should be at.
All right. Well, I think honestly, I don't know that we have much left to say.
Wait! I have something very important to say. Very important to say. We're talking about tension in this thriller, and there was one scene in particular where I had to hold in my laughter. And I normally I am not shy about laughing at things I find unintentionally funny in films. But in this movie I knew that'd be a real dick move. But so I was really struggling. But the scene where the kids are drowning in corn and feed in the grain silo, I couldn't stop like laughing inside just because I couldn't stop thinking about the scene from Troll 2 where they have the corn sex and the popcorn fills the trailer. And
oh no.
And literally my girlfriend was with me at this movie and I had subjected her to Troll 2, and like literally like when that happened I just kept like looking at out of the corner of my eye like I'm waiting for her to say like, all we have to do is heat it up like they do in that movie. I was waiting for it and I was so tempted to say it, but I knew, like, speaking of bad audiences, that I just could not. So if you've seen Troll 2 and you're gonna go see A Quiet Place, be warned that you might be that asshole cackling in the theater.
I will say, when you started to talk about this, I was all ready to defend that scene because I walked out of that movie thinking, great, now I'm afraid of corn. So I was all ready to defend that scene because it works really well as a tense scene. But you might have just ruined it for me. And all right, I guess this is just another movie I'm going to chalk up as an L because I'm not watching it again.
I've poisoned you. I've poisoned you and everyone who listens to this.
Yeah, you know what? You don't piss on hospitality, all right?
You won't allow it?
No, I won't. I won't allow it. I'm so fucking done. We're done with this shit. We're done. All right. Look, I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. I'm also got a website, isortof.com. All my shit's there. Go check it out. It's also got direct links to my Twitch page, my Twitter page, all that good stuff. I'm trying to write more and keep that updated more. I'll see how that goes. I'm really busy.
And I am Jackson Keller. You can find me over at Jackson J. Keller on Twitter, where I mean, I've been getting a lot more followers recently for reasons I don't understand, so either it's a bunch of bots or you guys are all being cool, so just keep on it. Keep following me.
Wait. You're getting what? Hello. You guys, what's he doing that I'm not? Is it because we're sending him your way to yell at? Are people yelling at you? Is that the problem? Go yell at me. Go yell at me.
No, nobody has actually like dove into my mentions yet, but like I did notice that it did start happening after we aired the Ready Player One episode. So I was wondering, like, am I really about to get a bunch of hate? Like, is that really what's happening here?
Oh, I'm a little sad that it didn't happen now. That would have been great.
But I had some hot takes this week, so it's not too late if you want to come yell at me. So you can do that over at Jackson J. Keller on Twitter. Let me feed on your hate. It gives me life.
If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the podcast, you can follow us at BADH_cast. We just kind of tweet out small updates, stuff like that. It's nothing too exciting, but does let you know what's going on with the podcast, which is always helpful. As always, we would like to thank Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're on Spotify, all that good places. Go check them out. Go give them a listen. Follow them around, all that good stuff. Next week, we will be discussing a David Lynch film. I believe specifically we're going to be talking about Eraserhead, unless something else comes up. So get ready for that. It's kind of in honor of some upcoming news we have. Don't worry about it yet. We'll let you know when it happens.
Exciting times.
Other than that, though, bye.